Well, the Department of Water and Sanitation has since deployed a team to investigate or look into the water quality in Hammanskraal and surrounds to identify possibly the source of this cholera outbreak in the area. So far, we know that 15 people have died. 37 others were still in hospital as of the last 24 hours. Let's talk about this situation now. Bring in an expert who can hopefully be able to shed more light on this, Professor Anthony Turton. A very good evening to you, Prof. Good to have your time tonight. A good place to begin, I suppose, is around how often our water is tested for potential outbreaks such as cholera.
Good evening to you and the listeners. The water is supposed to be tested on a regular basis, and those reports are supposed to be submitted to the Department of Water and Sanitation in their role as a regulator. This is part of a standard operational procedure, part of the licensing, water use license requirement of all of your water service providers. Unfortunately, that protocol was disrupted by Minister Nomvula Mokonyane when she was in charge of the department. She unilaterally decided to suspend the blue and green drop reporting standards, and as a direct result of that, there's been no more reporting until such time as Mr. Senzo Mchunu became the new minister. Then he reinstated the reporting of that. So we've had a disruption for quite a long time while Nomvula was in charge, and this is a dead standard reporting requirement. It should happen over many, many different parameters that are measured on a regular basis, because all water has to be provided to a standard known as SANS 241. The SANS 241 reporting protocol must be followed in all cases.
Well, Minister Mchunu has been in place now for a fair bit of time, and I wonder if the decisions taken under Minister Mokonyane, the now former minister, we should say, could have any bearing on the situation now as we see it in Hammanskraal, taking into consideration, yes, this cholera outbreak where we don't know yet if it came from tap water, but also the broader complaints around the quality of water in Hammanskraal over the years, almost 20 years, really.
Yes, absolutely. Hammanskraal has been a source of problems for a long period of time. We can't attribute all of this to the blue drop and green drop suspension, but that was just simply part of it. You asked me how often the testing takes place, and I explained to you that within the standard protocol, it would be at least weekly that these test results have to be submitted through to the Department of Water and Sanitation in their role as regulator.
Right, and that suggests to me, Prof, am I right to say, if this outbreak had come from the tap water resources in that area, it would have had to have been picked up much sooner than now we were talking about it. Initially, when the reports emerged, 10 people had already died.
Yes, it would make it far quicker to actually detect let's call it the epicenter, the sort of ground zero of any infection. That's not happened now, but I've heard from the previous speaker, that they're on top of the specific strains. They know what strains they are. That's good progress. We've got good scientists in the country. They know what they're doing, so let's listen to what they say.
Does it suggest, though, the regular testing or how regularly the testing should happen and how that would have helped to pick up any hints of cholera in the system if it was happening weekly, for instance, that perhaps this outbreak may have emanated from another source?
Well, it can come from any one of 1,000 different sources. The biggest problem that we have in the water sector today is the fact that we're discharging vast quantities of sewage into our rivers. We discharge 5 billion litres of sewage every single day into our rivers and dams across the country, and we only treat about 10, maybe 15% of that to a standard that is reasonably safe for discharge. So it could be any one of those sources. It could be a person coming down from a different part of Africa. We simply don't know. The fact that it's popping up in other parts of the country suggests that it's not just one source. But we can just applying logic. We can fully understand that if you discharge that amount of sewage into your rivers, then you're going to have problems in various places. And let's also not forget that since the blue and green drop standard has been reinstated, we now know with a high level of confidence that more than 90% of our wastewater treatment works are dysfunctional in some form or other. That is an absolute undisputed fact. So we can't really argue around around these semantics about the matter. The fact of the matter is that these procedures are there for public health and safety, and a direct outcome of these procedures being followed is the trust of the public in the system. When that trust is broken because these procedures are short-circuited or bypassed, that erodes public confidence and trust, and then you get a fertile ground for speculation, which is in nobody's interest at all.
Right, and the City of Tshwane said last night that it had conducted tests and found no traces of cholera in its piped water system. But I want to go back to the point that you were raising around the dysfunction within the space around water purification and supply, and talk about ultimately what it comes down to when you look at an outbreak of cholera: excrement found in water. That had been flagged at some point in Hammanskraal in the not too distant future. But overall, as a country, how well are we doing in ensuring that the water that is supplied to communities is completely free, clean, with no excrement or traces at all?
Well, let's get back to basics now. Let's first correct one misconception. You spoke now about a water treatment plant. You must remember that every municipality has got more than one water treatment plant. You've got a bulk water treatment plant that creates potable water from the river. That is your potable water supply, and that's what they've tested and found that to be free of cholera. And you would expect that to be free of cholera and all other pathogens 100% of the time. There should never be any deviation. There's a zero tolerance around that. That's your potable water, and we've got over 1,000 such plants in the country, dotted around the country, mostly run by municipalities. Then we've got about 850 wastewater treatment works. These are sewage works. They're also controlled by municipalities, and they discharge their waste directly into the same river from which we get our drinking water. And that's the problem. So we've lost control of the discharge of sewage into the very same source of water that our potable plant is extracting water from. That is why, none of those plants, even the most sophisticated of them, which is Rand Water, none of those were ever designed to take sewage-contaminated water and create safe drinking water about it. This is a simple fact of the matter. We need to get to grips with that.
How do we change that, Professor? What should we be doing differently?
Well, I think this is the cumulative result of many, many things. Let's just unpack what those many things entail. One of them, of course, is the whole load shedding disaster, because your sewage plants and your potable water plants are all designed to run under conditions of what is known in engineering terminology as a steady state operation. Steady state means that you've got a fairly constant flow through the system, so you know what all of the parameters are, all the processes involved. There are many, many processes that you have to sort of harmonize in one treatment cycle, if you like. So the load shedding, without any question of doubt, is playing a role. Load shedding also causes sewage pumps to break down, which then causes discharge directly into the river, which is another exacerbating factor. Then, of course, we've had the tremendous loss of skills across the board, particularly within the municipal sector, for a variety of reasons. And as a direct result of that, we've had a long, slow deterioration of our wastewater treatment plants countrywide. Big cities, small cities, doesn't make a difference. They've all generally deteriorated. Then on top of that, we've now got the current situation where we've got political instability at municipal level. So, there's almost any place you want to look at in the country, there's a squabble between different partners of a coalition. They can't agree on who's going to be the mayor and who's going to be in charge of what portfolio. And therefore, how can you take decisions about the long-term restructuring or repair of very complex infrastructure if you don't have stable leadership? So it's a combination of all of these factors that we're seeing today.
Professor Anthony Turton, a real pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your insights